Hi, welcome to Druid Talks. Today we will be speaking about the Gundestrup Cauldron, the iconography of it. To better understand the imagery found on the Gundestrup Cauldron, one must turn inevitably to Celtic art, especially of the Latin period. The Gundestrup Cauldron has remained enigmatic since the day it was discovered in a Danish peat bog near Boremosebog in May of 1891. Many have wondered and pondered over the mysterious imagery and have tried to give it an interpretation. Some have proposed a Scythian or Vedic origin to it, while others have recognized a clear connection to Celtic mythological themes and motifs. This flamboyant work of art is a unique example of the Latin period silver work. It was most likely crafted around 200 BC in Thracia for a Dalmatian Celtic client as a sacred religious object, and ended up in Denmark as a Cimbrian war prize. History shows that these Germanic tribes sacked the Scordiscian kingdom in 118 BC. The Danish archaeologist Sophus Müller, born in 1846 and died in 1934, had reassembled the cauldron after its discovery in 1891. The Gundestrup Cauldron comprises of 13 individual panels, 7 on the outside, but with an 8th missing. 5 on the inner side and 1 on the bottom of the cauldron. The 5 inner panels each seemingly depict a region of the night sky, while the one at the bottom describes the asterism or the subconstellation of the great constellation of Taurus, whilst the 7 outer plates illustrate the planets or wandering stars. So let's assume that the Gundestrup Cauldron is a star map or a star chart and a reminder of the macrocosm. So I didn't just retrieve all these things, this interpretation of the Gundestrup Cauldron from the aethers or from the Akashic records, as some would say. No, all of this work was possible because of the applied methodologies of the comparativist Dumézilian scholars such as Guyon-Varch and Leroux, and also with the structuralists such as Panofsky and Barthes. And so all of these ideologies were studied following these methodologies. In 1908, the French historian Camille Julien, born in 1859, died in 1933, speculated on the images found on the Gundestrup Cauldron, and this is what he wrote in a paper entitled Le Vase de Gundestrup. The figures and scenes which are represented on it refer to the highest gods of the nation, and these great gods are mostly those of astral and Chthonian character. Camille Julien also thought that the missing outer panel had to represent not a god, but a mythological royal figure. My idea is that it rather represented some other astral character, maybe Venus as the night star as opposed to Venus as the morning star, or probably a comet, or maybe some other astral body such as the anti-earth or Andecrunion in Old Celtic. Erwin Panofsky, born in March 30th of 1898 in Hanover, Germany, died March the 14th in 1968 in Princeton, New Jersey. He was a German-American art historian who gained particular prominence for his studies in iconography, the study of symbols and themes in works of art. So Roland Barthes, a collaborator and friend of Erwin Panofsky, was born November 12, 1915 in Cherbourg, France, and died March 25th in 1980 in Paris. He was a French essayist and social and literary critic. Another important thing to understand is that Indo-European mythology was basically cosmic. And this was discovered by Jean Audry. Jean Audry was born in 1934. He was a linguist, a professor of Sanskrit, and a founder of the Institut des études indo-européennes at the Jean Moulin Université Lyon 3, France. He was also a member of the Groupement de Recherche d'études pour la civilisation européenne. In his study called Cosmic Religion, he wrote these lines. This is how I entitled a set of cosmological and religious concepts centered around the notion of the dark sky, where in Indo-European there is no ancient name for the sky as such, but one same qualifier, sometimes masculine, sometimes feminine, designating either the day, Latin dies, or either the sun, Hittite Sius, thereby the sky and the day all in one. The Old Indo-European name Dios and Celtic Dies is also part of this list. Jean Audry in La religion cosmique des Indo-Européens, 1987. Also detrimental in understanding Celtic culture, especially in its Dumezilian terms, were the couple Christian Gouillon-Varch and Françoise Leroux. Christian Joseph Gouillon-Varch was born on the 18th of October 1921 in the town of Auray, France, and died on the 9th of January 2012 in Beauhart, France. He was a Celtic scholar, a mythographer and linguist, as well as a professor of Gaulish and Old Irish languages. His wife and collaborator Françoise Leroux was born in Rennes, France in 1927 and died in 2004. She was a French historian specialized in the religions of antiquity, and they collaborated with Joseph Dumezil in the fields of Celtic and Indo-European compared studies. So here is what Christian Gouillon-Varch and Françoise Leroux had to say in La Société Celtique. But as always, again and again, we must return to the same conclusion that the ideology of the three functions is religious and social, and only because of the inevitable consequence of its religious nature. Gouillon-Varch and Leroux in La Société Celtique in 1991. So much for the historical aspects. So now let's move on to the plates of the Gundestrup Cauldron and have a look at them. The iconography of it, and we'll start with the inner panels, which I have labeled the astronomical plates. And so starting with plate number 1. is the one featuring the seated figure with the deer and antlers and the larger snake and other animals. So the first at the left top side of it is a bull representing the heat of days, which represents summer's end, Samoinden, which is the summery end in Old Celtic. Then there's the stag. The stag, the deer is for Cedos, the constellation of Virgo and Libra. And the torque necklace in the sitting horn god's right hand is Cantos, a ring, represents Cantli Prinios, the constellation of Libra, literally meaning arborescence or constellation of the circle or of buckling, of the song of commemoration, the commemoration pillar. And so the horned seated figure represents Kernunos with the deer antlers for Libra, the scales, holding the serpent and the sub-constellations of serpents, Caput and Cauda. As for Scorpio, the seating part of the serpent bearer, along with the snake, is a representation of Scorpio. And then there's a lion or a leopard atop a wolf for the winter solstice period of 12 days. Dumani Prinios, the constellation of Sagittarius, literally standing for arborescence or darkening. Also connoting a smoky period or the fumigations. And then there's a boy riding a sturgeon or most likely a dolphin for Capricorn. Of course, the dolphin was also a symbol in Old Greek astrology, and as it was also for the Vedic astrology. And so it's not a surprise to find it here also. So it would have been a common Indo-European motif, probably from the period where the ancient Indo-Europeans were around the Black Sea. So the two opposing lions for the vernal point or spring equinox, a bull representing the return of warm days, and in the background the trefoil plants for the threefold aspects of nature, plants ending the annual cycle of Jamos or Gemos or Gemos winter, connoting shoots for vegetation, not to be confused with Gemo Rotlio or Geamrad, shoot cycle, dark half year, the autumn winter time or the vegetative period. Now for panel 2, the second plate, we have a sun goddess driving the solar chariot along with the sun's path. And so the two elephants flanking the sky goddess, Belisama or Brigintia, Brigindo, riding the solar chariot. She, of course, was the driver of the solar chariot for the Celtic Apollo, who had many names, of course. Granos and the Belinos and Belenos. And the opposing elephants represent festivals, moon feasts, the lunar aspects of the goddess who bears the new sun. And the elephants in Celtic, Olfais or Oloestis, meant whole, entire, all-encompassing animal, which implies a big beast. And of course, Roturkos was also the large the very big boar, and so elephants for the Celts were seen as giant boars, and this would bring also with the feast and festival of the pig roast and the boar meat and all that. So Westus means a yearling, and in wordplay with Westus, festivity, session in general, season of rejoicing, or period of rejoicing. And then below you have the two opposing griffins for the north winds, the northwest and the northeast winds, and a wolf for lustrations, imbolc, ambivolcaia, which puns with Lupercalia in Latin, which literally means surrounding and all around the wolf bitch. And so for heat, as for connoting a warmer period starting at midwinter or closing the cold period. Now for the third plate, it's the what I call the chronocrator, regulating the wheel of time. And what I mean by chronocrator is it was the old classical term for the time ruler. And so so here we have Tyrannus, if not Dagodeos, Dagda, of course, part of the Trimurti, the Celtic Trimurti, as the god of the night sky. And so he is holding a great cosmic wheel, which of course in Vedic, in Sanskrit, was called the swastika, or in Old Celtic, the Ramakareta. So this great wheel was comprised of the polar constellations, those of the northern skies which never set below the ecliptic, of course. And these were the stars of the Septentrion, and they were flanked to the right by Magruith, Mogus Retios, that is the servant of the wheel, the young servant of the young hero god, holding the flywheel, or moving the flywheel for the chronocrator, the god of time. So he wears a bullhorned helmet because this sets him in position with the Pleiades, the Taurus constellation, and also with the spring vernal point, which later on becomes the start of the astronomical cycle in classical astrology. And the two leopards for winter, or two brindled wolves, these are represent as in Gaelic the wolves for Fairlech, which shows Wailiaka in Old Celtic, which was the time of wolves. And so then you have the three griffins, the ram-headed serpent, the late winter and early winds blowing toward April. And so we have this westerly movement going toward the spring equinox, the vernal point of the month of Kutios, meaning both of rams, stormy, windy. A third westbound wind, griffin, hints at the warm spring winds of Simiwisonios, of the flightly breeze, the Garth Deas in Gaelic, the south wind for June. So the fourth plate represents of course, the spring vernal point now, and you have this taurine acme of days, which is now demonstrated in this plate. The three wild cats jumping over bulls with swords, yielding warriors, accompanied by dogs. So this vernal warm period is categorized by, of course, the wild cats who are in retrogression. They are moving now towards winter, which means that they're pulling away. And then you have heroes yielding swords, accompanied by dogs, three dogs. All of this is the tripling effect is to show that this period of Beltane, Belotenia, the fires of Belos, correspond to the three periods of the May celebrations, either 3 days or 3 weeks. So the cats represent the three main stars of Hyades, Katos Dire in Old Celtic. The three bulls are the stars of the constellation of Taurus, and the bull here represents the heat of days, the warming period, as represented by the dun bull, of course, who was called Donotaros also in Old Celtic. And the warriors, also there you have a linguistic pun, of course, now back to linguistics, and this is why language is very important in understanding the Gundestrup Cauldron in the cultural context. Warriors were called latioi in Old Celtic, which punned with lateis, nictemerons, that is calendar names. And the sword, smertus, represents the stars of Deneb, the alpha star of Cygnus, the swan constellation. And of course, the sword could also be, as for a cutting time for the cycle with the vernal period with the spring equinox. The dogs, the Cunes, are the stars of Canis Major, Cunomaros in Old Celtic, Sirius in Canis Minor, Cubecos, Canicula in Latin. These are the dog days, standing for heat, much like the wolf bitch represented, let's say, the warming period of winter. Here, the dog bitch here represents the warming period of summer, as for the dog days. So now with the fifth in our panel here, we have the cosmic march, the astral rulers, and the battle of trees, and the Red Riders, of course. So this period here has been described in a passage by Livy, describing what he called the Litana Widia, the broad forest, which was set in the Cisalpine region of Gaul, and this in all ways corresponds to the tree alphabet of the Ogham, and also the Cadgodeux, the Welsh Battle of Trees, poem by Taliesin. And here you have battle here in depicted with the pole star, the axis mundi. And so I have given here my interpretation, the astral cusps, according to the fabled battle of trees found on the Gundestrup Cauldron, along with the sounds, the original seed sounds, as they would say in Vedic culture, but what we would call in Celtic culture the key sounds. And these, of course, here you have another motif, very well-known motif, is the one with the carnix, which are the war horns. And so this and the torque, along with the torque, are typical Celtic symbols that were probably not very much found elsewhere. And so this really shows that the Gundestrup Cauldron was in fact a Celtic piece done by the Skordiskoi Celts of the Dalmatia, who were, let's say, ruling over the Thracian tribes. So finally, here we have the bottom plate, and the bottom plate is also interesting in itself because it sets the mode for Taurus again, which was highly important. Of course, this was along with the serpent bearer, which stood most certainly for Samain or Samonios, Samhain. This plate here was the Beltane plate, and of course in itself at the bottom, and with the horns of the bull missing, maybe the ivory was recovered because of its value. But here you have a crouching bull with a dying cat, and then you have a female warrior brandishing a sword and in pursuit, most likely jumping over the bull in pursuit of a bitch, a wolf bitch, or maybe a dog. So this would show that, let's say, if we go back to the yellow book cycles of Ulster with the life of Cuchulainn, we have these tantric sorceresses like Skatach and Watach, and this female warrior was probably one of these initiators, these warrior class female initiators for the young heroes that we have seen in another panel. So in this top plate, this represents the northern skies with Sirius the dog chasing this cat palug, we would say in, let's say, in Welsh context, Catos palukos, the defective or customary cat of Hyades. And the bull of the constellation of Taurus with the horns missing, of course, and Triskelions and the star of Aldebaran on the forehead of the bull. And the cat star represents the devourer of days, falling below Taurus after it was attacked by the dog and finished by the female warrior's sword, in which case would be Maya, the chief fairy or goddess of destiny of the Pleiades. And outbranching vine like plants covering the ground for Giamonos, and that is the sprouts the shoots for April and May, and which would have been and this plate here would correspond to what we have on the Coligny calendar as the dimension of Cialos Buis leap month. So this would correspond, this inner bottom plate would correspond to the spring leap month and the cutting section of that part of the cycle. So this is what we have for the inner plates. And now for the outer plates, the planets, the wandering stars. Planet Mercury, Luchtos, the wanderer, for bright wandering star. Plate 2, Saturn, Nocturos Vociros, the nocturnal loiterer, or in Goidelic, Melnos the sluggish. Plate 3, Mars, Cocidios or Cocos the red. For Mars, of course, as the god of war. Panel 4, Jupiter, the chronocrator, the cosmic ruler, Tectos, the messenger, the emissary, the wanderer, the wandering star. So Tech or Tectos is also the name for a planet, and it's the planet Jupiter. Plate 5, the moon, Luxna, Luan, Lytius, or Lura, Lucara, bright light in the sky for the moon. Six, planet Venus, the morning and night star. Ri, in the Book of Balamote, from Reia, in Old Celtic, was a common name for the planet Venus, the free star or the lofty star, which the name Ria or Ri is the same as with the Germanic Freya. Panel 7, the sun, Grena, Grian, beaming. And of course, in the Book of Balamote, this, along with the moon, is only marked by a symbol. The moon has a crescent or bullhorns. As for the sun is illustrated by three rays, the three cosmic rays or the three solar rays, as the triban. And so the name Grian is not on the list, of course. The eighth panel is missing. The eighth panel, the missing panel, of course, could be the doubling of planet Venus, and seen as the night star, the other one seen as the morning star. This is my conjecture. It could also be for the eighth planet, which was known in classical times by the Greeks and the Celts as the anti-Earth, Andekrundion in Old Celtic. So any of these could be let's say, one of the missing plates, and not omitting either the possibility that it could be a comet, so which would have made it more sinister. Along with the anti-Earth would have been a sinister aspect, and so it would explain why the plate was removed from the cauldron, or probably lost after it was removed. But anyways, by all means, we do not have that piece, but we can only conjecture on what it was. But in my mind, from what I know of that time period, I would be probably inkling toward, let's say, the doubling of Venus. So all for now, and I hope you enjoyed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the description box, leave you the link to the article on academia.edu, and this way you can go through it and look into it closely. Or you can purchase my book on Celtic astrology at McFarlane Books, and you can look on Amazon, and it is available there. All for now. Goodbye.